She was like, no, mommy, I can't take a deep breath. It's so hard to breathe. They tested for RSV, the flu, and COVID. That's when things went downhill. Welcome back to the House of Hughes. I cannot believe how much has happened since the last time I picked up my camera. And before I get any footage out on my channel and any videos up for you guys, I really wanted to explain exactly what happened with Blakely, why she was admitted to the hospital, what happened, and how she's doing now. We have officially been home from the hospital for a week, so I have definitely taken some time off just to focus on my kids. I've been trying to get up a little bit of short form content for you guys, which has been awesome, but I've just really wanted to be family oriented. Obviously, when scares like this happen, you really just shift your priorities and you remember what's really important. And I definitely wanted to take some time to just really dedicate to my kids. We also had Thanksgiving this past week, which was amazing. And I just want to update you guys basically on why Blakely was admitted to the hospital. I also want to say thank you so much for the outpouring of love across all of our platforms, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and here on YouTube. I am so grateful for the love that you guys have shown us and just for how much you care about Blakely. Thank you so much for checking in. I know that I posted some shorts of her being in the hospital, so if this is new to you guys, she was admitted. However, she is home now, thank God. But I did post a little bit of short content just so you guys kind of knew what was happening in real time. That was really important for me so that you guys could pray for her, send your well wishes and just your thoughts. I really believe in the power of prayer, the power of manifestation. And obviously I really watched miracles take place when so many people were praying and thinking about Beckham, and I really wanted the same thing for Blakely. So let's go ahead and just start at the beginning. Hunter and I were on a date night last Thursday, so the Thursday before Thanksgiving, and our babysitter was over. She's incredible. She's been with our kids for quite a while now, and Blakely was acting totally normal. When we got home, she again was acting normal, and when we started getting her ready for bed, because it was an earlier date night for us, we noticed that her breathing seemed a little odd. It seemed a little bit heavy. It sounded like she was starting to get a little bit sick. However, she didn't have any other signs of sickness aside from coughing a little bit. However, I don't know if this is the case with your guys' kids, but I honestly feel like my kids literally are always coughing. It's honestly like a continuous lingering thing, but we do live in Utah where it's really dry. It's cold most of the year. So I really didn't think much of it. However, Hunter actually has really bad lungs. He actually got pneumonia when he was, I believe, 8 years old, and he almost died. He was in the hospital. It was like really, really sad and tragic, very traumatizing. His dad also has really weak lungs. So we are just a little bit more hyper aware. Beckham has a lung disease from being in the NICU, not necessarily from the NICU, but just from being premature that was diagnosed in the NICU. So we're just really hyper aware of when our kids are not breathing exactly the way they should be, as I'm sure all parents are, but that's just a little bit of background of why we're a little bit more hypersensitive to it. I was like, babe, I'm sure she's totally fine. Like, she was acting totally normal, had tons of energy, no other signs of sickness, but we were a little bit anxious. I was like, you know what, let's just have Blakely sleep in our room tonight just so I can hear her really well. So she ended up sleeping with us, and at about 5 in the morning, her breathing just seemed like it was getting a little bit worse. And so I looked at her and I said, okay, baby, I want you to take a really deep breath with mommy on the count of 3. That's something that we do when Blakely is escalated, so she knows how to take a deep breath. She knows what that means. I started to count 1, 2, 3, and she was like, no, mommy, I can't take a deep breath. It's so hard to breathe. She literally said that to me. At that point, I was like, this is not acceptable. We need to take her into the ER right now. I want her oxygen saturation checked regardless of how normal she's acting. Hunter quickly got dressed and he took Blakely to the closest ER, which is about 5 minutes from our house, so we're very fortunate. And when they got there, they checked her oxygen saturation and it was in the low 80s. With the score being in the low 80s, that's something that Hunter and I perfectly understand. We understand oxygen support because of our time spent in the NICU. So we knew that her life wasn't necessarily at risk. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, this is critical, but that is too low for her not to have oxygen support. They kept her at that ER for a few hours. They checked her vitals, they drew some blood, they tested for RSV, the flu, and COVID, all of which came back negative. However, her oxygen saturation was still very low. They had an oxygen mask on her the entire time, and my sweet, sweet Hunter was literally having to like force her to keep it on. If you can imagine a 3-year-old having an oxygen mask, it pretty much went exactly how you would imagine. She was very, very unhappy. It was very hard for her to understand what the hell was happening. I was at home with Beckham because Beckham was obviously asleep, just waiting to hear if they were going to admit her. So Hunter was keeping me updated, but I did reach out to my parents and was like, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. I might need you to come over and have Beckham so I can go be at the hospital. So my parents were kind of on standby. Hunter's at the ER with Blakely. They did tell us that they wanted to transfer her to a different hospital so that they could admit her for oxygen support, which is exactly what they did. So Hunter called me when they started the transfer. They did have to go over by ambulance because she had to stay on oxygen. Hunter didn't have the option of driving her. I went ahead and had my mom come over and take over Beckham, and then I met Hunter and Blakely at the hospital. That's when things went a little bit more downhill. So we went to a hospital that's about 25 minutes away from our house, and as soon as we got there, they put her on a cannula that obviously goes in her nose. That was really, really tough for her. She did not like having the oxygen on, but she is very good at obedience, and we were super grateful for that in that moment. I mean, obviously all children are going to struggle with obedience to a certain extent, but when we told her, like, Blakely, you cannot touch the cannula, she was really, really good about that. And it was so sad because you could tell, like, she would kind of bring her hands up and she would like really, really want to touch it and wanted to take it out, and just she had that impulse to do so, but she would stop herself and she would just cry and say, mommy, please take it out. Mommy, can I please go home? She was so sad, and that was just brutal. Obviously, seeing her in a hospital bed brought up some PTSD. It was very, very difficult for Hunter and I. However, I will say, seeing her on oxygen support, it was kind of interesting to just see how what we've been through impacted us in this situation, because you never really know until you're there. But it was interesting. It impacted Hunter and I a little bit differently. For me, I was able to stay a little bit more just optimistic and, in a sense, like mentally and emotionally stable, because I knew this is not critical. She's going to be totally fine. We're on low flow when we first got to the hospital. But for Hunter, it brought up all of that trauma from being totally out of control in the NICU, and he was extremely overwhelmed and extremely scared. And that is so hard to watch, you know, the man of the home and the protector and just the man who loves his children so much and is like just so emotionally stable and strong for us all the time, just to watch him be so fearful. So that was really, really hard and just really sad. Hunter was also with her that entire morning, and just watching her be forced to get a cannula, have an oxygen mask, it was just awful for him. By the time I got there, she already had the cannula in, so I kind of saw the aftermath of it, which was still horrific, but I can't imagine like the position that Hunter was in. Like I mentioned, she started on low flow and things did start to slightly decline. Her oxygen needs were actually going up. And so she ended up going on to high flow, and then they had to do an IV, and that was really, really challenging. They started with her hand and then moved to 2 different spots on her arm. And by the time the 3rd poke did not work, that's when I kind of started slowly losing my shit. And I was just like, you will not poke my daughter again unless you know that you are going to be able to get this IV in. They ended up calling anesthesia, and a doctor came up, and he was obviously just very, very skilled. He was able to get the IV in her ankle so that we were able to give her fluid and sedation medication, as well as a steroid. So they were also able to take x-rays of her lungs, and they did see a lot of inflammation and fluid in her lungs, and they gave her the diagnosis of bronchiolitis. So that is a respiratory illness, and because of the genetics in our family, we weren't surprised that this was really, really impactful for her, and it was really impacting her ability to breathe. They did explain that this has very similar side effects to RSV, and it's basically treated exactly the same. They had her again on fluids, steroid, sedation medication so that she could sleep, and then of course on oxygen support. So we were in the hospital for 3 days and 2 nights. We went in on Friday morning at about 5 a.m. and we were discharged on Sunday evening at about 8 p.m. And it was really interesting because watching Blakely, she did get worse before she got better, which was something that the doctors warned us could happen. And she really went downhill before she went uphill, like I mentioned. And it was interesting because she obviously went downhill pretty fast. Like, she was admitted to the hospital within like 10 hours of us noticing that she was just like feeling a tiny bit under the weather. But she was on Sunday morning still on high flow, still needing steroids, still needing fluids. And then throughout the course of Sunday, she was on room air for 8 hours and acting like a totally normal, healthy child. And it was just crazy because she just like, boom, hit the ground running and immediately got better when she woke up on Sunday, which was such a massive blessing. By the time Sunday night rolled around, we were like, yo, can we get out of here? She is like tearing up this hospital room, jumping up and down, so happy. And that was like the biggest blessing ever. It was definitely a difficult few days, but both grandparents and our nanny really stepped in and helped us with Beckham so that Hunter and I could pretty much be at the hospital the entire time she was there. It was so sweet. Sorry, the lighting just changed major, but it was so sweet because Hunter literally like didn't even leave her bed. It was so cute. Blakely was so insistent that Hunter was right next to her the entire time. Hunter was kind enough to let me come home and get rest overnight, and then I went back first thing in the morning, and then obviously stayed until late in the evening every single day. And then, like I said, grandparents and our nanny helped us with Beckham. We are very grateful that she is home, healthy. There were no lasting side effects. She did not have to come home on oxygen or medication, but it was a very scary weekend, and we're so grateful for all of the thoughts and prayers. But before I got any other video up, I really wanted to just make sure that I got this video up for you guys, gave you a story time and explanation of what was happening, and just say thank you so much for all the love and support. But we will be having videos up for you this week, and I'm super excited about all the content and footage coming. So I just wanted to say I love you guys, and I'm so proud of Blakely for being so brave like Beckham. And I think that both kids in today's video are the perfect example of bravery. So I want to remind you to be brave like not only Beckham, but also like Blakely. I love you guys so much, and we'll catch you in our next vlog. Bye!